this is modeled. So I have a box, and then I have a group that gets all the edges of the box, and then I have another group that gets all the faces of the box, and then I've got a poly extrude that extrudes out the faces, or extrudes them in. We turn on the wire shading so we can actually see where it's extruding those in. And then we've got the poly extrude that kind of extrudes those in a little bit, and then I've got a poly bevel that bevels out all of the edges. And so this is still totally procedural since it's all just edges. And I can add more to it or change the size of it without messing with anything. So there's the box. And then I group everything that's part of the box. So with this group, I want the box to be one piece. And basically this group just kind of gets everything. So basically it's just selecting the entire box. And then it uses that group to apply the color. So everything in the box is going to be this kind of teal color. And over here on the tube, just have a tube, and then do a polyfill. And on the polyfill, and this is important for Substance Painter, you don't want to have any polygons that have more than 4 sides, because Substance Painter doesn't really know what to do with them and just kind of gives them like, whatever. And so you're going to have a hard time getting it to look the way you want it if it's got more than 4 sides. So with this, instead of doing the single polygon, I set it to triangle fan. And by default, it's got this like transform, like deform thing turned on, but I just uncheck that box to turn it off so I get a nice flat end of the tube. Then we had a clip so that it's kind of inside of the edge of the box here so that it's not kind of floating. Then we add mirror, so the mirror will add one on either side. And then the same thing, like the box, a group selects everything included there, and the color gets applied to that whole group. And then we merge them together. So that's the high poly mesh. So that's the high poly part that has all the information that we're going to then bake to the low poly. Your low poly mesh doesn't have to have fewer polygons, but you do need to have one mesh that you bake to another mesh. They could be identical, but you need to have one that you bake to another in order to kind of tell it how this is going to work. And on the high, you're going to need to have normals to tell it how you want these to look. So I'm going to turn this off so it's back just to smooth shaded so we don't see any of this stuff. And just for now, I'm going to turn the colors off so we can kind of see this just as gray. So right now it's looking a little bit weird, and it almost looks like this is kind of curved in because of the way it's rendering that surface. And so we need to give it normals to tell it how it should actually do that. So this is where these are going to split apart. Instead of adding it at the merge, I'm going to start to split these apart and do the normals a little bit differently here. So with this normal, we can basically tell it what angle at which we want it to stop smoothing stuff out. At the max, it's going to try to make everything nice and smooth, and this is actually what you're going to get if you just import it directly into Substance Painter, is this kind of mushy mess where it's all kind of rounded out. We don't want it like that. We want to use this angle, and the lower the angle, the more of these are going to be kind of nice sharp corners. So we got that, and that's kind of nice and sharp, but we can take this down even more. And now this is nice and flat here. Actually, what we want to do is bring it all the way down until we start to see like faceting in here. If we bring it all the way down, we actually see every single polygon is kind of flat. So this is what normals are doing, is kind of telling it how to smooth stuff out in the render. If the angle is like this, then we're going to smooth it. If it's like this, then we're not going to smooth it. So that's essentially what the normals are doing here. And if we just increase this, we can see that those kind of disappear. So now we've got nice smooth faces, but down here, it's still a nice kind of flat angle. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm just going to alt drag this over for the tube. And the tube is going to be a little bit simpler because the tube is basically after 90 degrees, then it kind of rounds this whole thing out. Again, this is what you're going to get in Substance Painter if you don't bake your normals to a low-res mesh. It needs to have that normal map there. And it needs to have another mesh to reference in order to bake the normals down. So with this one, I don't need to take it all the way down here to where we're seeing like every single edge polygon. We just need to be at under 90 degrees. It's 90 degrees where it kind of gets that weird shape because it takes this 90-degree angle right here and then kind of tells it to round that out. So there's our normals, and we want to make sure to set these to go to null objects. because we're going to be calling those null objects and then putting these into different objects that we can then export. So this is going to be the box high. And I'm going to make another null. And this is going to be the box with a tube high. So now this is what we're going to then call to put in our geometry nodes later. So if I jump up a level, I'm going to go ahead and save this. Ultimately, what we're going to end up with are all of these separate geometry nodes that have, like each one has a piece of the mesh in it. But we need to have high, so these are all of our high nodes, and then we have low. So we're going to kind of break it down and then organize it. Each one of these is basically just got an object merge that's referencing a piece of the mesh. So we'll make all of these again a little bit later. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and make the geometry nodes for the high resolution stuff. So I'll make one there, and then just duplicate it out. And we'll call this the high, or the box high. And make sure too that you do use this underscore high and underscore low, because that's what it's going to use to match which piece goes with which piece. So then we've got this one here is going to be our tube high. And inside of box high, I'm just going to go in here and make an object merge. And in the little drop down here, I can tell it I want to find all of the high pieces, so the high resolution pieces, and that's going to come from the master. So we've got a box high and a box low, so the tube high. We set that, and it'll actually bring that whole thing. So all of the network above it, it'll bring in. And the same thing, I'm just going to copy this and then go into the tube high here. We'll paste that, but this time we'll change that. So instead of going to the box, it goes to the tube. And we'll accept that. So now let's go back into the master, and I'm just going to turn the colors back on. So we have our ID colors, and even here, it'll actually bring those colors in. So any changes that we make, it's going to reference that whole stack. All the stuff is going to flow down into this. So if we make any changes, it'll all flow into these two separate pieces. Don't want to parent those, so keep those separate. And since I'm already, I guess we'll make the rest of those geometry nodes later. So now let's look at the low-res version. With the low-res version, it's pretty much the same thing, and what I'm going to do is just duplicate this out. All of this stuff, the box, the bevel, all that stuff is the same. The tube is the same. What I add here is a little group. I'm going to skip that since I'm figuring most of you guys are just going to select them manually instead of using groups. So the grouping thing is like a procedural thing, but we'll skip that. What we want to do is we want to merge those together. So we end up with something like this. And we want to set up our UVs. So we'll set up a UV unwrap and a UV layout. Then we'll separate them apart again. So I'll blast those apart so that I can have the box and the tube separate again. We'll apply our materials, and then we'll put those into some null objects. So that's what we're going to do right now, is we'll just kind of recreate that whole network there. So I'll move this over, and I'll leave this in here so you guys can see it as a reference because it's in the materials folder. And what I'm going to do is just select all of the stuff that is basically above these colors, because I don't want to take the colors, but I want to take everything else. So I'm going to take all of these nodes above the colors. Actually, let's just get a box around on the inside of here so we don't get the box itself. And then I'm just going to alt drag them over here. So there's our low res stuff, and let's actually bring this over again so we can see kind of what this is doing as we go. So first I'm going to just merge them together so we can see what everything looks like, and I'll take these two and hook them into that merge. But nothing is working, and the reason it's not working is because these groups have changed. So this edge group that I've got here now is edges 2 instead of just edges, and this prims is now prims 2 instead of prims. Since I copied it, they can't have the same name, so we need to just change the names to make sure that they reference the right stuff. So this one here that's referencing prims, it needs to reference prims 2. So now we get our extrusion, and then the bevel, which is referencing the edges, needs to reference edges 2, and then we get all the stuff that we should have. All right, so now we need to add our UVs. So we'll add the UV unwrap. And for 90% of the cases, this should be just fine. We don't care about seams, and this does a really good job of just flattening it out. But we can check. I'm going to add a UV layout so that we get a little bit more efficient placement, and we're going to add a UV quick shade so that we can see what the UVs look like. So we should get nice, even UVs. If you get like the little checkboxes are stretched out, that's not going to work. But we have a lot of seams here. The seams are totally fine. When we get into Substance Painter, we can easily hide those using triplanar projection. So we don't really care too much about the seams for this. So for this, we're just going to leave that as long as you've got a nice, even placement. I'm going to go into the UV layout here and then just check the scale islands. If we press spacebar 5 here, we can see all of our UVs that it's created. And if I scale islands to match, it'll just make sure that the islands they stay the same size and proportion as the pieces in the polygons that they represent. So let's jump back out here. So we've got our box, we have UVs, and now we need to break this apart again and add our materials. You have to have materials applied, or else it's not going to understand what to apply. So it's going to put everything on one shader. So if you've got different types of materials, that's how you want to separate it out. If you want to have a metal here and like a different color metal, or like a painted metal, and you want to have a glass, you want to separate it out by different materials. So for each part, you want to have a different material. You probably want to have at least like 2 or 3 materials across the entire ship. Don't go crazy with it. You don't want to have like 50 different materials to deal with, but the more materials you set up, the more options you're going to have in Substance Painter. So I've got a couple of different materials that we're going to add. And so after this, we'll add a blast node. In the blast node, we'll just go here, and I'll drag a copy. Actually, we'll drag a copy in a second. But this first blast node, I want to get just the box shape here. So again, this is not the like procedural way to do this. But if I come up here, get the little white arrow, and then just double click on this, it'll select the entire box, but not anything that's separate. So all the pieces, like the cylinders that are separate, won't get selected. So press enter. And what I want to do is just check this delete non-selected. So this will be the box right here. And I'm going to alt drag this over here. Drag this over here, and with this one I'm just going to do the uncheck that, so basically it'll keep the opposite part. So now I've got the polygons, or I've got the cylinder, and I've got the box, and now they're separate pieces that I can now export separately. And I'm going to go ahead and add the materials to this. So we want to add a couple of groups. So for our materials to apply, we need to tell them what group we want them to apply to. So a good way to do that is with groups. I'm going to add one. Let's add a second group. Connect them together. And then with this one, I'm just going to select this group here. We'll call this the metal group. And then this one, we'll call this the painted group. So with this, I want to select, like I'm going to have all of these little panels kind of on the inside be the group. Let's go ahead and get rid of the quick shade there, so we don't need that. So I want all of these faces here to be part of the group. So with that, I'm going to go up here to my base group and enable it, and then select this little white arrow. And I'm just going to select each one of these faces. Hold Control to delete those, or commands, and Shift to just add faces to it. So holding Shift will get all those faces. And just make sure you don't have any extra other random faces. Now that I've done this though, I can't go back and change any of the geometry. So if we do this, we want to make sure that we've finished any geometry changes that we planned on making. So we've got all of our panels. Press enter. Now if I open the groups thing here, we can see we've got our metal group is just those. The painted group is going to be kind of the same thing. With the painted group, I'm going to start with the whole thing, and then just control click or command click these to get rid of them. So painted group is going to be basically everything else that's not in the metal group. So I should end up with something like that. Just make sure that I've got all of the pieces. Yep. Okay, so now we should have the painted group is like all of those, and then the metal group is all of the square faces on the inside. And then for the cylinders are basically just going to be all in one group, so we'll just make one group for the whole thing. So these, we'll do the base group and then just select those, or you can even just enable the base group, and it should, let's make this visible here. By default, if you don't select anything, it'll just get all of that stuff, so we don't even really need to select it. So now we can make our materials, so we'll add a material here. So I'm going to have two materials on this side, one for the metal and one for the painted, and then I'm just going to have one material actually over here. And so we'll call this the metal mat. This will be our painted mat, and this will be also a painted mat. So this one and this one, they're both going to reference the same texture. So now we need to go make our shaders. So in order to get these to work, we need to make shaders, and then once we have that, we'll set it to the groups and everything. So I'm going to go into the material palette. And for this, you don't need any special shaders. Just drag Principled Shader off and Principled Shader. We got two of those. One of them we'll call metal. Again, the settings for these matter not at all, but the names matter. So make sure that you have different names. For these, so we've got metal and painted. And then I'm just going to go back to material and go back to our objects. And then back into our master here so that we can apply these materials. So in the metal, let's make that visible. And first I'm going to select the group, which this is going to go in the metal group, and then I'm going to select the material. Just delete that there so we can see our mats and the metal, accept. And then with the painted, do the same thing. I'm going to turn off groups here so we can see this a little bit better, but I'm going to take this group for painted group right there, and then add the painted material too. All right, so now we've got that material and we have that material. And then finally, this one we're going to do the same thing. Tell it to use that, we want this one to be painted group 2, and then we'll tell this one to use painted group 2 and tell it to use the same painted material that we used earlier. Now we can change that in Substance. That's what the IDs are for. So we've set up the red ID and the blue ID. So even though they have the same shader, we can still change them. And we can put different colors and different paints and different stuff on each of those. So we're going to add some nulls here. And this is going to be the box low. I've already got a box for select, so let's just delete these here so they're not kind of interfering with their stuff. So that's box low, and then I'm going to do another null. It's going to be the tube low. So these null objects kind of contain all of the stuff in the network above them. That's what we can use then to reference and bring those into our other objects. So I'm going to jump up and we'll add our two more geos. And here we'll add our object. So this is the hot low. So we'll find that box low. It'll let me select it. And then I'm just gonna name this box low. And then I'll drag a copy of this down here. So we have, this will be tube low. And instead of here, we'll just change it to reference the tube instead. Alright, so we've got both of these now. We'll just turn this off. So one has our materials and one has the colors. So there's our color IDs, box and tubes on the high, and this one has our materials on the low. So now what we need to do is combine these together into an FBX and combine these together into an FBX. And this part is where you can't do it in the Apprentice version because it doesn't give you FBX export option. You can only like drop a file node and you can't combine multiple things into a single file node. So we're gonna go up to File, and let me just save this before we do anything else. Go to File, Export, and make sure that you're on Filmbox FBX. And first we're gonna tell it where to go. So this I'm gonna put into the geometry folder, and we're just gonna call this class demo. Actually, and I'm gonna put underscores here, just to make sure. So this is gonna be class demo high. And again, make sure that you keep that naming convention underscore high, underscore low, so that you know which one is which. And then leave it set as FBX. And then we need to tell it which objects to use. So in the export objects, click this little guy. And right now we've got all of these different pieces. But what I want to do is I want to create a bundle. Basically, we're going to bundle all the different pieces that we want together. What's going on? No?
Oh, I'm taking a picture.
Okay, you guys are working in Maya. Why are you taking a picture?
I want to take a picture of this to the proper.
Okay. So this here, we're going to take the box high, hold control so we can select multiple pieces, but I'm going to take box high and tube high. And what we need to do is create a bundle. So this is going to be the demo high bundle. And I'm just going to click this create button to create a bundle. And basically anytime that I select this bundle, it'll automatically grab those specific objects. So we'll accept bundle here. And make sure that it's going to box high. And so everything should be set and good to go. Let me just double check, make sure that we've got the bundle, yes, and we've got box and tube, yes. All right, and then we'll click export, and it doesn't take long to go like instantly. And then the next part, we need to just do the same thing for our low. So we go to export, phone box, and this time I'm just gonna change the name to low, there. And then here, we're gonna create a new bundle where we're gonna get the box low and the tube low. We call this demo low, so we don't save over our set, and then click create, and accept the bundle. So now we've got all of that stuff going, so we got two objects going into the high and two objects going into the low. And that's pretty much it. Now we can take it into Substance Painter. So there's a lot of setup, but now we can go in Substance Painter, and once we're in Substance Painter, it's just like click and drag and you're done. So we're gonna go to File, make a new one. And the way Substance Painter works is it treats your low project as the file. So for this, we're just gonna leave this set on PBR metallic roughness. For File, we'll select that class demo low, the FBX. Open. For the document resolution, I'm going to set this to 2048. And if you're on the Macs, you're probably going to see, instead of DirectX, it's going to be OpenGL. Except you'll have to do this on the Windows computer since I don't have Substance Painter on these Macs. So if you're on your own Mac, though, it's just going to say OpenGL, so you can leave it at OpenGL. And then I'm going to click OK. And it'll take a little bit. Now we can see this. Navigating in here basically is the same as navigating in Houdini. You hold the Alt key or Option key, click and drag to rotate, or right mouse button to zoom in and out. What you can see is looking really blobby, so that's why we need all of those maps, because otherwise it's just going to assume that you want to smooth everything out, and we don't want to smooth everything out. So we're going to get this like really blobby looking shape. So that's where we're going to bake our textures. when I created those different materials, essentially what I was doing is creating a list of materials that I can work with in Substance Painter. So if we solo these, here's all of the metal, and here's all of the painted. So you need to make sure that you have different materials applied so that you can get them separated here. Otherwise, it's just all going to go onto one thing. You won't be able to separate it out and have one color here and another color over here. You'll have to hand paint all of that stuff. That's kind of a pain. So we've got these separated out by shaders. So this potentially could be transparent, or it could be plastic, or it could be wood. And then this one could be metal. If you've got two different shaders, you want it to behave with light in different ways, and you'll need different shaders. You can't have a metal shader also be wood. It can only be wood or metal. It can be either reflective and shiny or not. You can't have it be like wood and glass and metal. So for each material that you've got, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you have different pieces. If it's going to be all metal, then you can potentially get away with it, but then you'll need to have an ID map in order to put different parts in different places. So I'm going to go back to all so we can see all of these. And with each one of these materials now, it's going to bake out a texture set for us. So I'm going to go into our texture set settings here and just scroll down to bake mesh maps. Right now we don't have any maps, but we're going to go ahead and bake our mesh maps. And to do that, I'm going to go to our file here, and we're going to go to class demo hi.fbx. Open it, and you can see now it's finding the ID. So we have those vertex colors that were assigned, and it's also finding normals. It's also finding ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is where if you've got like a flat surface and an object really close to it, anything around that is going to tend to be darker. Even if there's no direct shadow, it's just going to tend to be darker. It's called ambient occlusion. So our ambient occlusion is going to kind of darken different areas. And we're also going to get curvature. And these are two really important things for Substance Painter. You can't work in Substance Painter and make a good looking mesh without baking ambient occlusion and curvature, because when it looks at how it's going to like procedurally apply like dents and rust and wear and tear and stuff, it's looking literally at the curvature. So if there's an area of high curvature, it's going to say, oh, this has got a lot of curvature, so it must be like it's going to have a lot of wear. So it's going to put a lot of like noise and scratches and dust in that area. Whereas if it's an area with a lot of like ambient occlusion, where it's like two surfaces that are kind of close together in that corner, it's going to assume that there's not a lot of wear and tear that happens there, but it might put more like rust and that kind of thing. So there are different sliders and controls that we can use based on ambient occlusion and curvature. So that's where you have to, even if it's the exact same mesh, you have to bake out some maps so that it will get that ambient occlusion and curvature, and then normals are going to control how kind of blobby this looks. So we don't want it to look super blobby. For this, just to make sure it doesn't crash, let's start with 2048, or start with 1024. If it looks really bad, then we'll do 2048. But I don't want to crash my computer doing this. So we're also going to scroll down here and set the match to by mesh name. So since I have the box low here and the tube low, it's going to match this box low to the box high, and it's going to match the tube high to the tube low. So it's going to look at these, and it's going to say, oh, these are both underscore low, or these are both the same name, underscore high low, these are both the same name, underscore high low. So now I understand that they go together. So your naming is really important to make sure that Substance Painter understands which pieces should fit together. So in here, we've got match by mesh name. Under anti-aliasing, I'm just going to do like a minimal amount here so it doesn't crash anything. And then we'll do bake all texture sets. And as it bakes, we'll see it kind of start to change here as it's applying those different maps. There we go, some of the normals. It looks like it didn't quite get our normals, and it also didn't get our ID. So we need to give it a little bit more distance, it looks like. And let's make sure that it has a little bit more distance here. No, it failed to load. Hold on, it's having an issue down here. So it looks like it's not baking something because it's not getting something from the file because it couldn't load one of the meshes. So let's look at this thing. High poly scene couldn't get the color map from mesh. Cannot be loaded. Cannot be loaded. Okay, so let's just output that high poly again. So select these. And just make sure that we've got everything turned on here. Yep. Okay. So let's just export it again. So if you run into an issue, just export it again. This time it looks like it's the high res that has the issue, so we'll export filmbox FBX. And make sure that goes to _high. And for our export, I'm going to set it to demo high. We'll make sure that we get box high and too high. I'm going to go ahead and just all of these as well, since we don't need those right there. So we get the master reference, box high and too high. And demo high, and we'll create that. Get rid of that one right there. Call it demo high again. Create, accept, and then export again. Alright, so let's go back. And select our demo high again. Alright, so it is finding that stuff for whatever reason. Okay, so go to bake all texture sets again. Still having some issues, so let's cancel. Oh, because I think because I had them turned off probably. So they do need to be visible when you bake them, and I had them turned off. So make sure that they're visible, and we'll just try this once more. Okay, yeah, so now it's actually, so we can see it kind of changing how this looks. As it bakes these out, we're starting to get like some nice hard edges here. And we're getting like these nice sharp corners in there. We are getting a little bit of weird stuff there, so we might need to change our distance on the bake. So bring it back in a little bit so it's not too far away. We don't want it, generally you don't want it too far away because it's gonna cause weird issues like that, so we'll try it one more time with a little bit less distance on it. Alright, well, I guess it's just our UV seam right there is causing some weird, so we've got all of our maps in here, and essentially what this has done, if we go into our little drop down here, we've got our normals. It's kind of telling it how the curvature should look, especially like in here, we can see where it's giving it like these nice hard edges. And if we go into ambient occlusion, we can see where it's kind of darkening different spots, especially kind of around here where these edges meet and where this edge meets here as well. And we've got our curvature where it's just going to tell it where there's a lot of like wear and tear, kind of how this is going to curve. So all these different maps are necessary for it to understand how to apply your materials. But once you have them baked, you can essentially just kind of drag and drop these smart materials in to your layers panel. So right now we've got our paint and our layers. And I'm just going to go in smart materials. And for the painted, we can just put like, I don't know, this like machinery color down. this is where it starts to slow down, as well as applying all this stuff. Because it uses a lot of video memory, and this computer doesn't have the best GPU. So now we've got our metal, kind of painted metal applied, and then we can go, say, maybe this like aluminum color, stick it on there. And now we've got this nice metal. And we can get into the layers and like working with these next class. For now, just use some smart materials. What I do want to look at is our ID map though. So one thing that we've got here is this aluminum, but I want to have these little handles be a different color than the rest of this kind of painted metal. And the way that we do that is with our IDs. So let's go ahead and close this so it's not taking up system resources. So we can do this with IDs. Basically, I'm going to drop this down. If we look at our IDs, it's going to have baked the ID, that red and the green ID colors. And so we can apply different colors based on those IDs. So what I'm going to do is just kind of duplicate this. So I can right click and duplicate this material, except it's getting cropped off because, so we're just going to Control C, Control V. And for this one, I'm going to give it a different color. So instead of the aluminum base being gray, oh, I'm on the wrong material here. Let's delete that one. I'm going to go back to my texture set and make sure I'm on the painted texture set. So we're seeing the yellows. So this one, do Control C, Control V. And for this, I'm just going to change this metal base color from yellow to like maybe an orange or a red or something like that. But I only want that to apply just here on these little handles. And so that's where our ID maps come in. So for this, I'm going to click on it and make a black mask. Not on that part, just on the machinery itself. And this whole thing, I'm going to black mask. And then on that black mask, I'm going to right click and add a mask with color selection. And I can just go pick color and say I want to apply that to the red. And so now it's going to apply that orange color only to the red stuff and the yellow color to everything else. And then you can kind of get in and start just, once you're kind of messing around in Substance Painter, it's really just, you can almost just kind of figure it out by like clicking and dragging and trying different stuff and seeing what it gives you. So we have these different mask editors which kind of apply or change how different materials get applied. So there's like rust right there, so we can kind of mess around with how the rust gets applied to this. Then we've got our dirt, and there's just lots of different things that you can mess around with, like the scale of things and the application. So, but we'll get into messing around with the layers more on Friday, but for now, just use smart materials and see what you can get with smart materials, because there's a ton of different things that you can apply. So like this here, instead of aluminum, maybe I don't like the aluminum, I can add something else from our toolbar here. Let's just reset the UI so we can get this back. So maybe we can put fabric on this instead of the aluminum color. And then we'll get kind of a different one, except my computer's taking forever to actually render. You can also, once you're done with this, we're going to be rendering this in just Substance Painter. So when you're done, we can actually view our background. So if we go into our display settings, we have this environment opacity. So we can turn the environment opacity on, and the exposure. That's going to change our lighting, and we can also increase or decrease the blur so we can actually see it in the environment and then actually render it out. One thing though with the render, it does not work very fast on Macs or anything with an AMD GPU. So, and no Mac since like 2014 has had an NVIDIA GPU. If you want this to render quickly, it'll happen like instantly on a Windows computer with an NVIDIA GPU, but on a Mac, it's going to take a while. So this will just kind of sit here and you'll see it kind of getting less grainy for a while, okay? So when you render this stuff, it will take you much less time to put it on a Windows computer or render it there, because they'll go a lot faster, okay? All right, any questions for that? Yes? Yes.
What's our final deliverable for this?
Your final deliverable is going to be some renders from directly out of iRay here.
Out of this.
Yeah. So this is the